Hello and welcome along to the latest episode of Susty Talk, Edie's video interview series designed to keep you feeling connected during lockdown, lockdown 2 and semi-lockdown and beyond. I'm delighted to have Iain Macbeth on the call today from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. He is Director of Strategy for Electric Vehicles in Europe, so hopefully we can chat about all things EVs this afternoon. How are you doing, Iain?
Hi, Sarah. No, very well, thank you. The sun's shining where I am today, so yeah, a little bit frustrated with lockdown, but all things considered, it could be a lot worse.
For sure. Lucky you, it's just started raining
Right.
where I am at home. But yeah, so I understand that it's your first time coming on for an Edie interview, so it'd be great to hear a little bit about your role and remit at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, how you got to be in that position and what you're working on at the moment.
No, that's great. No, thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be here today. So I've been with Enterprise just over a year, not quite the year that any of us were expecting. And, you know, it has been quite an interesting year. You know, sadly for lots of people, it's not been a particularly great year. But in terms of what we've been doing behind the scenes and planning for the future, it's an absolutely amazing time to be involved in this industry at the moment. So I joined Enterprise about just over a year ago. Really, it was because I've always felt that the car has a part to play in the sustainable transport mix. You know, even in cities, you know, not every city can be made by sustainable or active travel, and you know, the car does play a part in that. So I've always sort of wanted to sort of do something in that space, and the role that Enterprise had just absolutely fitted that bill. You know, a lot of things that we do, we're actually involved in, you know, local branch network. We have a huge local branch network around the UK. Many of those are located in cities. So clearly, you know, they've got to adapt to the future that's coming, and it's a fantastic opportunity to help Enterprise navigate that journey. Before I was at Enterprise, I worked nearly 10 years at Transport for London, starting on sustainable travel, working with businesses on their workplace travel planning and things like that, and did a huge amount in putting cycle stands into businesses and providing information and just sort of just talking to people about sustainability. Ironically, a lot of that early work was about working from home. We did a lot of work with the DFT and private sector partners and the unions and so on. I think we're probably a little bit ahead of our time, but it's been fascinating to see how the last few months has played out and what we looked at nearly 10 years ago. And you know, when I was at TfL, I worked in the innovation directorate, so I was head of foresight for the last few years at TfL, working on autonomous vehicle trials. Ironically, some of those trials were done with Nissan, with a Leaf. I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more later on. Working on connected car, EVs, as you might expect, and then a bunch of other things like demand responsive transit, mobility as a service. We even did our first e-bike trials back at TfL during the 2012 Games. So quite a long track record in working on sustainability. And if I go right back to when I first drove my first EV, that was 25 years ago, when I worked for Boots in Nottingham, and they were, you know, right at the forefront of active travel and sustainable transport modes back then. So yeah, it was an interesting time. So 25 years on, I actually do run an EV on a day-to-day basis.
And you mentioned how this year has been just a great time to think about this and to press ahead. I haven't spoken to Enterprise before, so what are the business's current sort of EV and climate targets, and have any new targets have been set this year by the business?
Well, it's interesting when we talk about targets, because actually the targets exist and are established generally at governmental and regulatory level, and because I work across Europe, there are different timescales that people are working to. I think the big thing that's happened really in the last year is that change from 2040 through to 2030, and different variations and flavours in between, slightly different timescales in Europe as well. So the key thing for Enterprise is that we're helping our customers work through that, providing different solutions for them in different business markets. France is perhaps a little bit ahead of the game at the moment, and there are some mandates in France that we're working towards. So it's kind of a moving picture at the moment. It's yeah, we're working with different governmental bodies and all that kind of stuff, but also our customers as well. It's very easy to sort of come out with a target, but we've got to sort of think about how we plan to get there. And that's a key thing. So what we're trying to do is actually help our customers think about the whole EV journey. It's not just about, oh, let's just pop out and buy an electric car and a charging point. It's way much more complicated than that, and there's a huge educational pace to do that. So what we can help our customers is to do that transition piece. You know, we obviously work very closely with the OEMs as well, but also sort of the tech companies, local authorities, utilities, and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a bit of a joint undertaking, and we play our role in that, obviously. We're investing in vehicles to bring that to market, but we rely on lots of other people to help us do that as well.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, you go ahead.
So, I mean, I think one of the interesting things is that, you know, we offer our customers a wide range of different vehicles to meet their needs. And that's what we respond to on a day-to-day basis when we get inquiries from private sector companies, from local authorities, from other institutions and things like that. So we have the wide range of vehicles across the network. Some vehicles incredibly well suited for the EV transition right now. Others are a little bit more challenging, and you know, the OEMs and manufacturers will bring vehicles to market over the next few years that will address some of those challenges. So yeah, it depends on the marketplace to a certain extent where we're directing our activities first, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Of course, and you mentioned how obviously different markets have different targets around EVs and different supporting policy frameworks, but they've also had different responses to COVID-19. So what has it been like trying to get EVs on the road in partnership with some of those organisations you mentioned in 2019? So have you noticed anything different about, can people even have a rental car, or is it easier or harder to procure a car? Or are some of your clients maybe changing their investment decisions because of the events of 2020?
It's interesting you mentioned the investment decision, because Enterprise as an organisation, we're incredibly fortunate that we're actually in private ownership. We're founded in 1957 by the Taylor family. Chrissy Taylor, Jack's granddaughter, took over the running of the company on the 1st of January this year, and boy, has she had a challenging introduction to being the head of the organisation, and she's been fantastic. But the key point is that private ownership has given us some financial stability, and to continue to invest in long-term in EVs globally. And in some respects, actually, we're ahead of the game in Europe than perhaps we are in North America, which is obviously where Enterprise's head office is in St. Louis. So that private ownership and financial stability has perhaps put us in a different playing field than some of our competitors. So that's the key thing. What that enables us to do really is to invest in new vehicles and things like that. So we're continuing to do that. Getting hold of EVs has been a little bit challenging. Obviously, with the OEMs shutting down the production lines, the supply chain's been impacted. So it has been a little bit more difficult than usual to get hold of EVs. But because of the volumes of vehicles that Enterprise buys, we have got great relationships with all the OEMs. So that enables us to sort of really have a good detailed conversation with their product planning, so that we've got that pipeline of vehicles coming down the line.
Mm-hmm. Got you.
Other things, we would be telling porkies, to be honest, if we said it was business as usual throughout the year. It has been challenging in different parts of the business. A lot of people probably associate Enterprise with the holidays and things like that, and airports, and clearly that has impacted on that side of the business. But probably what people don't recognise is that Enterprise is far more than a holiday rental company. We've got a huge B2B part of the business. We started off as an accident replacement vehicle with insurers back in the States, and that's still a large proportion of our business today. So there are different elements of the group, and we do different things throughout that time. We've got close to 50,000 commercial vehicles in the UK alone at the moment. So you know, as an essential business providing vehicles to essential services and frontline workers, you know, that's where we've been able to really help out during COVID. You know, COVID testing vehicles and so on. We provided those for the health authorities and things like that. So we've been able to sort of, you know, play our part in helping during the COVID time. It's meant we've had to change some of our business practices. So we have our complete clean pledge. I'll get that right. It's a bit of a mouthful. But basically means that we clean every vehicle very comprehensively between each hire. So every time a customer rents a vehicle, all the touch points have been cleansed. We've introduced sort of, you know, almost no touch type transactions where a lot of the transaction is done outside the office environment, just on a you know, on a launchpad type of environment. So yeah, there's been a little bit of a change in how the teams integrate with our customers. Clearly, that's you know, been interesting because we pride ourselves on our customer service, and there's an element of human interaction that is difficult to achieve during that, but that's been great. We've managed to keep the car club running, and that's where the majority of our EVs in the UK are based, in car club. Some of our competitors weren't able to keep going through that, and what we've seen is we've seen some of that car club traffic come back over the last few months as people are comfortable with that cleaning pledge and things like that. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, but yes, we are still getting vehicles, and we're still managing to rent them out to the right people.
Fantastic, good to hear. Yeah, that is something I thought about as soon as it first got launched. I was like, hang on, I've covered so many things about like Uber getting new vehicles, or car makers having car sharing coming online in some of the busier cities in mainland Europe. So it looks like we can see the other side for that sort of service, it seems.
Yes, no, I mean, the car club is a fantastic opportunity for people to go and try an EV. You know, there's a big behaviour challenge around EV adoption. People don't feel comfortable with what they're used to.
Right.
So, you know, being able to sort of provide EVs for people to go and try just for an hour or a couple of hours, you know, that really helps sort of people get over some of the misconceptions that people might have about running an EV on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned this year that obviously the government has brought the 2040 deadline ban on new petrol and diesel car sales forward by a whole decade over the course of this year. But there's also been a number of other things announced. So even back at the budget, we heard about that behaviour change element. Rishi Sunak announced, we never want a driver to be more than 30 miles away from a rapid EV charging point. We just want to make this really easy. And then that was reiterated through further spending at the spending review, for example. So taking everything that's happened into account this year, what do you make of this policy approach here in the UK? And yeah, what needs to happen in the future to help companies like yours?
Well, I think it's very positive. I think that's the key thing. You know, we've welcomed the government funding announcements in the spending review and the budget, and the numerous other things that have come out over this year, and particularly that investment in the publicly accessible charging network. I think that's the key thing from a user experience perspective for us. You have to remember that a lot of our customers don't have access to charging vehicles at home, so they're not necessarily able to charge up overnight. And those kind of things. So if you think about, you know, if you're going on a business trip and you want to pick up a vehicle at an airport when they're operating, you're going to a destination, you don't know if they've got charging infrastructure there and those kind of things. So I think that is fundamental, you know, for what we see, and we really support the government's work on that. You know, we've been talking to government departments about what needs to change over the last 6 months, and you know, I think we'll be seeing some exciting announcements from the likes of DFT and Bays and OLEV and Ofgem about what they can do to help bring that forward. Clearly, the private sector's got a part to play in that, and obviously we're talking to a lot of the utilities. I think there's an amazing opportunity going forward for the rollout of that charging infrastructure. You know, from our perspective, I think we need to be under the roaming and interoperability between networks is a key issue. I run around in an EV on a day-to-day basis, so I have a standing joke that I've got two wallets. One's got my normal credit card money in it. The other's got my RFID cards to the different networks. And, that's great for me because I go around, I need to understand these things. But for somebody who's just popping into an airport or one of our home city locations, they just want an experience similar to what they have today with their ICE vehicle. So,
cool.
so just bringing that together, I think, is probably the biggest challenge we've got at the moment. It's just improving that customer experience, the roaming, the rapid charging, that kind of stuff. What else is there? I mean, I think the right environment for a market-led transition is essential, that people feel confident in them. What we're seeing is that businesses need to be a bit supported to making that transition. I mentioned earlier on we're helping businesses through that. People come to us and say, we'd like to buy some EVs, and we say, yep, sure, we can do that for you. Have you thought about how you're going to charge them? And there's still quite a little bit of an quite an education piece that needs to happen really to get to people to understand, because people don't necessarily realise that there's different charge plugs. I know most of us will be moving towards CCS, but most people probably don't understand the difference between a Type 2 and a CCS. There are different battery sizes, there are different charging rates on the vehicle, there are different fill levels from the different charging posts and things like that. People understand AC and DC. So there's a bunch of stuff, of terminology there that kind of needs to be socialized. And of course, when you're talking to a utility, they have slightly different acronyms in their industry from people in automotive. So there's just bringing all this space together. So there's lots of interim steps to go for, I think. But I think the other thing we're interested in seeing is obviously the more and more announcements about clean air zones and ultra low emission zone expansion in London, for instance. So we're actively supporting these by providing solutions and thinking about these solutions ahead of when this legislation and regulation will come in.
Yeah, we've had to look a lot at cities actually pausing work on those this year. So I guess that does mean naturally that there's going to be a lot more announcements next year or the year after.
Yeah, it's not going to go away. This is not something that people can ignore. We've got to sort of plan and transition through this. I think enterprises really well. We're very well positioned to help businesses and consumers to have that transition, but we do need to have the government to help us support it on the way. So particularly sort of investment in infrastructure. We're looking for perhaps tax breaks or something like that to enable people to sort of move ahead with the infrastructure design and delivery. Whether or not that's partly because private sector is bearing quite a large investment burden at the moment on that side of things. I think if we could have tax credits for grid upgrades and that kind of thing, that would be helpful going forward as well. So there's kind of this partnership with government that needs to happen in the future.
Fantastic. Well, we've covered so much ground and we're nearly out of time for our call. But considering the time of year that it is, we are asking everyone that comes on for an interview at the moment to tell us about their professional sustainability related New Year's resolution or resolutions. So did you get a chance to think about this one, Iain?
Well, I did. And the fact is, I don't normally do New Year's resolutions. So you put me a bit on the spot here. I mean, obviously this year has been a bit of a challenging year, and I don't think anybody thought we'd be going through what we did, what we've been having over the last 12 months. What I would suggest is it's a perfect time for businesses and individuals in particular just to make their own resolutions and to look at an EV as an option. Go out and try one. It doesn't have to be across the board. It doesn't have to be a whole department or a division within a company. It could even be one team. Just go out and try it, because most people, once they've driven an EV, generally find going back to an ICE equivalent is not as nice as they thought. And I think that sort of getting out, try an EV, and you probably will never look back.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Iain, for your time.